Hi class, how are you? Dr. S. And here we are already on chapter 5 and chapter 6. Remember that they're separate. So chapter 5, you'll have to do your writing assignment and then click the link. It's two parts, even though it's one link, one video, they're two separate parts. I just do the lecture all together. It makes it easier on everybody instead of having two separate links. I'm going to apologize for my voice. Had a cold. Um, Still can't speak as well as I'd like. So if I lose my voice or if I cough, I apologize. So let's go ahead and get this started. Okay. So chapter 5, social interactionist theories. Let's move on. Labeling. Labeling theory. Labeling theory is based on the premise that society creates deviance by branding those who are apprehended as different from other individuals, when in reality, they are different only because they have been tagged with a deviant label. Does that make sense? Just because someone has done something wrong or has made a mistake in their life, sometimes in some social realms, they're always bad or always deviant if you're a kid. Let me show this video real quick.
Labeling theory and self-fulfilling prophecies are essential aspects of understanding deviance through a sociological perspective. The application of a label is a crucial event, as it is then often internalized and followed. Let's take a look at a classic case study conducted by David Rosenhan in 1973 on being sane in insane places. In this examination, Rosenhan intended to find out if healthy and sane individuals would be recognized when placed inside of a mental institution.
This is interesting.
He admitted 8 pseudo-patients into 12 different psychiatric hospitals. The patients reported hearing voices and showed fabricated symptoms of schizophrenia. Upon admission, then, the pseudo-patients ceased showing any signs of abnormality in an attempt to be recognized as sane. After spending many days in the institution, none of the patients were detected. All were then released with a diagnosis of schizophrenia in remission, without even a clear symptom of the disorder. The labels that the pseudo-patients were given became self-limiting and self-confirming, leading the patients to accept the diagnosis and behave accordingly. This was evidence, Rosenhan argued, that we cannot distinguish the sane from the insane in psychiatric hospitals. In an article from American Sociological Review, Bruce Link and collaborating sociologists explore the ways in which labeling theory has been criticized and offer a modified approach. He claims that even if labeling does not directly produce mental disorder, it can lead to negative outcomes. The more patients believe that they will be devalued and discriminated against, the more they feel threatened by interacting with others. They may keep their treatment a secret, try to educate others about their situation, or withdraw from social contracts that they perceive as potentially rejecting. Such strategies can lead to negative consequences for social support networks, jobs, and self-esteem. In more general terms, we can see that the self is constructed through social interactions, similar to Cooley's interpretation of the looking-glass self. The effects that labeling has can be devastating, oftentimes shaping a person's entire life chances based solely on one negative label, for example, felon or addict. The idea of the self-fulfilling prophecy, similarly, is defined as a false definition of the situation evoking a new behavior which makes the original false conception become true. In other words, one's expectations often influence behaviors. For example, if a person wakes up and assumes that he or she is going to have a very bad day, then it is most likely that that will actually happen, even though there was no actual other cause for it. This helps to explain the Pygmalion and Rosenthal effect as well. The Pygmalion effect describes the phenomenon that occurs when the greater the expectation placed upon people, the better they perform. Here, labeling theory can be applied to understand why people internalize and express these labels, ultimately changing their behavior. The Rosenthal effect specifically explains the Pygmalion effect in terms of teachers' expectations and students. The higher the teacher's expectations, the better the student will perform due to a positive label.
So very interesting. Let me get out of this. I apologize, all this bouncing around. But it's important. So if a kid messes up, and maybe they mess up bad, as long as they don't, they don't kill somebody, obviously, but they commit a car burglary at a very young age. They learn from it, but perhaps in their social realm, they're always labeled as that kid, or that kid's a criminal, or he's bad. So it can have a negative effect. And again, my story, just it's a real. I don't normally share too many things, but I was told, and this was in high school, I was told by my principal that, and I really didn't understand the reason why, that you'll never amount to anything, you'll never graduate, you'll never move on, you're just going to be a bum. He and I didn't see eye to eye. And I told him what I thought of him. Of course, that's me. Um, but, well, I tell you, that could have had a negative effect. His telling me on a constant basis that I would amount to nothing. I chose to discount that, but those type of people can really negatively label you and set you up for failure the rest of your life. So we have to be careful. All right, social interactionist theories of delinquency. The theoretical perspectives discussed in this chapter are termed social interactionist theories of delinquency because they derive their explanatory power from the give and take that continuously occur between social groups and between individual society. Again, there's a give and take. Well, let's talk about it further. For example, the dramatization of evil. I apologize for my voice, folks. I'm getting ready to lose my voice. Dramatization of evil. Theorists examine the process whereby a juvenile came to the attention of the authorities and was labeled as different from other juveniles, as we discussed. They theorized that this process produced a change in both how such individuals were then handled by the justice system and how they came to view themselves. Let me go back.
I'm here to prove that Purple mattress blows memory foam.
We'll get this out of here. Hang on a second.
Only Purple passes the durability test, body heat test, and the all-new...
Goodbye. This is a prime example.
A tattooed 6-foot-tall giant of a man with pale grey eyes, stowed away on a ship bound for Angola around 1920 to work as a merchant seaman. After arriving in Lobito Bay, he hired a half-dozen local guides for a crocodile hunting expedition. But Panzram had other prey on his mind. As the canoe wended its way down the river, he shot each crew member dead before feeding their corpses to the hungry crocodiles lurking below. That was just one of the many crimes, including 21 murders and more than 1,000 rapes of young boys and men Panzram admitted to committing. Unlike charming and cunning serial killers Ted Bundy or Rodney Alcala, Panzram remained brutally honest. In his autobiography, penned in the prison cell, he said, "For all of these things, I am not the least bit sorry. I hate the whole damned human race, including myself." But could he really be that bad? Yes, at least according to experts who have studied him and found that the roots of his evil could be traced back to his childhood. Born in 1891 to a poor farming family in Minnesota, Panzram's father abandoned his family when he was about 8 years old. Soon after, Panzram landed in a reform school called Red Wing for a string of burglaries. Red Wing schooled Panzram in sadism, punishing him with beatings and rapes, which led him to a realization: the world is this shithole, and I'm going to go through the world and wreak havoc in it. After graduating, he spent years sleeping on freight trains. During one ride in a boxcar, he was gang raped by transients, leaving him a sadder, sicker, but wiser boy, as he noted in his musings from the prison. In 1915, he traveled through Idaho, California, and other states along the Columbia River, burning and burglarizing buildings and raping countless young men and boys. Around the same time, Panzram was sentenced to 7 years at the Oregon State Penitentiary for burglary. To punish his unruliness, the wardens hung him from the rafters for hours, turned a hose on him, and kept him in solitary confinement for weeks, leaving him to feed on cockroaches. Not long after escaping in 1918, Panzram committed his first murders. In New York, he hired sailors to work on a yacht bought with his robbery bounty, lulled them to sleep with alcohol and shot them dead, all 10 of them. Soon after, he set sail for Angola, raping and killing a young boy before the crocodile hunting expedition. About a year later, he hit aboard a Lisbon-bound ship, only to find that the police there were on the lookout for him, aware of his crimes in Africa. So, soon after, he stowed away on a ship to the US. In 1928, Panzram was arrested for a series of burglaries and jailed in Washington, D.C. After a warden found out that he had tried to escape, the guards handcuffed and suspended him from a beam, beating him unconscious. Feeling sorry for Panzram, 26-year-old prison guard Henry Lesser handed him $1 to buy food and cigarettes. No one had ever been kind to him in his life. Over time, the two became friends. Each day, Lesser slipped him a pencil and a few sheets of paper, convincing him to write his life story. Panzram was sentenced to 25 years at the United States Penitentiary, Leavenworth in Kansas. There he crushed laundry foreman Robert Wong's skull with an iron bar, landing a spot on death row and refusing human rights groups' efforts to spare him from the gallows. After years of abuse, it was his form of suicide. Panzram got the death he craved in September 1930. Just before getting executed, he told the executioner, "Hurry it up, you Hoosier bastard. I could kill 10 men while you're fooling around." Lesser kept Panzram's writings, but publishers were uncomfortable with the graphic manuscript until 1970, when it was published as Killer, a journal of murder. Joe Coleman, who painted the cover art for the book, said, "The guy was really quite an amazing writer. I'm struck by the intelligence and the things he could have been capable of."
So, what do you think? Interesting, huh? If that isn't a clear depiction of environmental causation, I don't know what is. Talk about being influenced in the extreme direction. Nevertheless, labeling theory. He was labeled, but continued, because of his torment, to be a murderer. He couldn't stop. All right, so the result. The process of tagging a juvenile resulted in the youth becoming involved in other delinquents, like gangs. The delinquent then became involved in a deviant career, and regardless of the efforts of individuals in the community and the justice system to change his or her evil behavior, the negative behavior became increasingly hardened and resistant to positive values. The learned behavior became so powerful, obviously, again, especially in Panzram's example, he couldn't change. Theorists propose that the less the evil is dramatized, the less likely youths, kids, are able to become involved in deviant careers. So give them a chance. Move on. So I'll ask you, talk about thoughts from TV programs, shows, video games, Grand Theft Auto, these shooting games. Does it have a negative effect on kids today? It's your opinion. Think about it. All right, so deviant careers. So it's thought that once a person is caught and labeled, that person becomes an outsider and gains a new social status, with consequences for both the person's self-image and his or her public identity. Again, I point back to Panzram. The individual is now regarded as a different type of person. All right, so radical non-intervention. According to some theorists, and they quote, delinquency laws are actually counterproductive because they produce more delinquency than they deter. I don't know. That's just their opinion, not necessarily mine. In 1973, some delinquency researchers went so far to argue for a policy of radical non-intervention, which simply means to leave the kids alone wherever possible. I think that's the other end of the spectrum. You can't just let them do and be kids and they'll figure it out. No, because there has to be some type of consequences, in my opinion. If you commit a criminal mischief offense, if you egg someone's house, you get caught, you need to clean it. You can't just leave them alone. So I could ask you, would or could this work today? I don't think so, but perhaps you do. Just think about it. All right, power control theory. Theorists view the relationship between gender and non-serious delinquency as linked to power and control. They suggested that the presence of power among fathers and the greater control of girls explain why boys are delinquent more often than girls. This power control thesis based the measurement of class on the authority that parents have in their positions at work. And they assume that the authority of parents at work translates into conditions of dominance in the household and in the degree of their parental control of its children. It's a very interesting concept. All right, so moving on, and we're going to continue to do so, restorative justice. Restorative justice programs try to teach empathy to youth offenders, trying to explain to them what repercussions, what happened, that they were victims in these cases. Even if they destroy a mailbox, driving by and hitting mailboxes with a baseball bat, there are those who are affected negatively. Obviously, the victims, the owners of the mailbox. This requires regular feedback about how our actions affect others, relationships in which we feel valued, and our worth. So restorative justice provides a framework for community members to reestablish a more appropriate relationship between community members and young people and to reduce the fear adults have of young people. We're not going to watch the video, we're going to move on. The process of restorative justice, especially face-to-face processes, involve the telling of personal stories in intimate settings. Basically, they put them in a group with the victims and let the victims tell them what kind of negative impact they had on their lives. I'll let you absorb that for a minute. Okay, moving on. Chapter 6. Remember that the previous chapter 5 is a separate assignment. You have to, in 200 words minimum, explain what you learned. Okay, so moving on to chapter 6, gender and delinquency. Let's watch this real quick. Actually, it's pretty long. We'll move on because it basically covers what we're going to cover right now. Today's feminist criminologists agree on gender-based differences in adolescence experiences and their developmental rates and the scope and motivation of male and female patterns of offending. There is a difference, but in that breath, there are also correlations, there are similarities. They looked at 3 areas of inquiry: gendered pathways, gendered crime, and their lives as a whole. So let's discuss. All right, so the pathways. Here you see physical and sexual abuse can go either direction at the top here. They can either turn into psychiatric disorders or substance abuse. And I'll point back to Panzram in chapter 5. He went to the psychiatric disorder direction, just got angry. But as you see both, they kind of convene in the middle where it has a negative labeling effect. And at the end, the result, they're adjudicated delinquent. So boys versus girls, to a large degree, understandings of gender and gender-based roles are acquired through socialization. And that depends upon what culture that you were raised in. And for example, the United States, it is completely different in what happens in Atlanta, Georgia, as compared to Seattle, Washington. Children are socialized into pre-existing gender arrangements and construct understandings of themselves and how they relate to others in terms of those frameworks. Boy gets the BB gun, girl gets the Barbie doll. Just because. They're gender roles. And in most instances, that works, but not all. All right, so gender. Gender, the personal traits, social positions, and values and beliefs that members of a society attach to being male or female. And I gave you that example. Now, as far as a gender role, That's the societal definition of what constitutes either masculine or feminine behavior. You know, back in the 50s, guys wore pink shirts all the time. And then in the 80s, I can tell you, people thought you wore a pink shirt, there was something wrong with you wearing a guy. Well, I got a pink shirt. I like my pink shirt. I like that it's come back to where it doesn't matter. I'm very comfortable that I'm a boy, and I like to wear pink ones on a great while. But I'm not. I don't need to be adherent to any specific gender role. For example, all right, here's a chart. Girls, identity development in relation to other people. Okay, based on relationships, resolving conflict. Girls, they focus on connectedness and independence. And types of aggression, they're relational aggression issues. In other words, it depends upon what it is that the issue is presented to them, whether they become aggressive or not. But in boys, identity development is in relation to the world. Remember, we're the hunters, we're the gatherers, we're out there fighting. Okay, that's in our genes. The method for resolving, it's based on the rules, but that conflict is still there. How do we handle it? With our fists, with weapons. The focus on a boy is independence and autonomy. Grow up, be a man, pave your own path. Well, why can't that be for girls? And it is, and it should be. And they tend to be over aggressive because that's how they handle conflict. That's how they defended hunting ground. That's how they got food for their tribe or their family. Those innate characteristics are still present, just subdued to a point. All right, so let's look at the female delinquent. Researchers have identified basic demographic and offense patterns as well as background characteristics such as family, the dysfunction, trauma, physical abuse, mental health issues, substance abuse, risky sexual behavior, academic problems, and delinquent peers as common features among girls who end up in custody. So, the typical female delinquent, she's 13 to 18. She's experienced academic failure, truancy, dropping out. She has a history of repeated victimization, especially physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. She's from an unstable family background that includes involvement in the criminal justice system, lack of connectedness, and social isolation. She has a history of unhealthy dependent relationships, especially with older males, sometimes because dad leaves. She has mental health issues, including a history of substance abuse, and she's apt to be a member of a community of color. These are just facts taken from national polls, national data. I'll let you look at these. I'm not going to read them all. The differences between girls and boys delinquency. So I'll read the top part. A few years ago, the Girls Study Group, a collaborative project funded by the Office of Justice Programs at the U.S. Department of Justice, released a 20-page report titled it Causes and Correlates of Girls Delinquency. That document summarized the findings of 1,600 studies that had been conducted on girls' delinquency during the last 2 decades. A baker's dozen of some of the most interesting findings are as follows, and we'll just read a few each page, but I welcome you to pause this and read this yourself. So let's go to the second bullet. On the whole, girls' delinquent acts are typically less chronic and often less serious than of boys. And I guess that's by definition what it is that we determine as serious, but as far as the federal government is concerned, I'm sure they're talking about carjacking, robbery, murder. Girls tend to use drugs as well as commit theft. Okay, so at the top bullet, there is evidence that girls more often experience certain types of trauma such as sexual abuse and rape than boys do. Well, that makes sense. I'll let you read the rest of these. Well, let's go to the second last bullet. Boys outnumber girls by a ratio of 3 to 1 in the diagnosis of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, and other conduct disorders. That goes back to the example I told you, our innate, what's in us as far as hunter-gatherers, defenders. It makes you wonder. All right, so second to last bullet. Early puberty, especially when coupled with disadvantaged neighborhoods and family conflict, is a key gender-related factor in predicting girls' delinquency. That's interesting. One could say that's environmental as well because, well, or argued as genetic. I guess it's a case-by-case basis. All right, so there we go. The three pathways to female delinquency. We have victimization, substance abuse, and then acting out. It's illustrated in this picture. Some theorists argue for genetic-specific explanations because traditional sociological theories of delinquent behavior fail to adequately explain the experience of being female. There are psychological explanations, biological and constitutional explanations, and sociological explanations. Makes you wonder, is it a combination? The first one points to our first causation, which is genetic. Okay? Genetic, actually the first two. Genetic predisposition. All right? That we're set. We're born with these things. We're born with psychological explanations. We're born with biological and constitutional explanations. You can also say that the top bullet, psychological, is environmental in nature. Like the third bullet, sociological explanations. Or is it a combination? Is it free will? Good question. I don't have the answer, but it poses good argument. All right, so the summary. You can read these. In fact, I suggest you do. I'm not going to read them all here. All these theories are important. You might see these on your quiz, so you're welcome to pause these as you're doing that. Okay? There's labeling theory, interaction. They're all explained for you on this table, and they're in your book too. Okay. So, wrapping it up, the feminist theory of delinquency contends that girls' victimization and the relationship between that experience and girls' crime have been systematically ignored. We're assuming that the girls are fine, that it's only boys we're dealing with, and for the most part it is, but we're overlooking them. And why? Because girls are frequently the victims of violence and sexual abuse. But unlike those of boys, girls' victimization and their response to that victimization are shaped by their status as young women. Meaning if a girl is promiscuous and then she's raped, she must have deserved it. Continuing why? Their victimizers have the ability to invoke official agencies of social control to keep daughters at home and vulnerable. But as girls run away from abusive homes, they are forced into the life of an escaped convict, unable to enroll in school or take a job to support themselves because they fear detection. So, where do they go? What happens to them? Well, as we know, a lot of them turn to prostitution, drugs, or both. So gender bias processing of girls. Adolescent females grow up in a culture that facilitates domination and control by males. Although that's changing, it's still the case today. They have different diversion opportunities and programs offered to them, such as preventing adolescent pregnancy, Operation START, Project BOLD, media literacy, economic literacy, and the list goes on. There's a lot of programs out there that are aware and cognizant of this ever-growing and changing problem. Again, but we still ask why. Girls are on the run from abusive homes, criminal activities, exploit their sexuality. But in the end, who's responsible for helping them? Who's responsible? Better look in the mirror because it's you, the law enforcement professional. You can't help everyone, but you sure as heck can take the time to help one that comes along. This is a great story right here as our final thought. A police officer responds to a fire in 1998, takes a 5-year-old girl unresponsive, not breathing from a fireman. The cop does CPR in the back of his patrol car as his partner races them to the hospital. He gets there, but he gets her breathing again as they arrive to the ER. In 2016, That same officer attends her college graduation. By the way, she graduated magna cum laude, the highest honors. We are responsible. We're the ones that step in, because sometimes angels don't wear wings, they wear uniforms. Let's watch this. I love this video. If I can get
Dear
play right.
officer, I want you to know that I see you. I see you choose the booth in the restaurant that allows you to have your back against the wall. I see you pulled over 2 hours past your shift as you finish your reports under a streetlight. I see you as you direct traffic in the scorching heat, the gusting snow, and the downpour of rain. I see you as you watch mainstream media crucify your character while minimizing your cause. I see that you are tired, frustrated, and misunderstood. I see that you are hurting as the world watches you bury your brothers and sisters that died because they were guilty of one thing: wearing a uniform with a badge. I see you. I see that you are flesh and bones just like me. I see your cause, and I want you to know that I appreciate it. I hear you. I hear the sound of the garage door open after a long night of consistent tragedy. I hear the sounds of your heavy footsteps, and I can instantly tell what kind of day it has been for you. I hear the sound of your duty belt hit the kitchen table as you relieve your back from the 30 extra pounds you've been carrying all day. I recognize the sound of Velcro as you unstrap your body armor and your work boots. I hear the sound of your little boy's bedroom door open as you enter his room. I hear the sound of you kissing his cheek and whispering that you love him. I hear the sound of your heartbeat as you choose not to share your day because you know that it will only scare me. And even though you do not speak, I still hear you. I still know that something happened on your shift that has broken your heart. I feel you. I feel the difference in the way you hug me before you leave to go to the grocery store and the way you hug me before you leave for one more night on your beat. I feel the grip of your hand as they wheel you back to surgery to fix an injury you have sustained on the job. I feel the wetness of your tears as you try to make sense of the tiny life that was taken by the hands of her parents. I feel the sigh of relief when you see your little boy running towards you after you've experienced too much darkness in the world. I feel the sinking of your morale as you watch a very vocal and sparse opposition flood social media with their misplaced passion for their idea of justice. I feel the way you look at me as you read that one more of your brothers or sisters have fallen victim to a hate crime. We both know it could have been you. I need you. We need you. I know the world is making you feel like the only allies you have can be found in each other. I know that it is becoming increasingly more difficult for you to put your life on the line for a world that has seemingly turned their backs on you. But I also know that won't stop you. What the world seems to forget is that you don't suit up every day for their approval. God knows you don't do it for the money. You do it because it's your calling. You do it because you believe that you can help goodness persevere in the face of evil. You've chosen to be a warrior, and warriors don't hang up their hats because of the opinion of someone else. I wish I knew how to fix it. The only thing I know how to do is support you. I'm aware that there isn't a magic solution that will make the world see you for who you are. I just want you to know that I see you. I need you to know that you are appreciated by a vast majority who is in your corner. You are honorable. You are courageous. You are worthy of a nation's support. We see you. We hear you. We love you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for getting up one more day to protect my family. You are undeniably my heroes.
All right. So walk tall, folks. I know you're getting through these classes, and summer semester is tough, but you can do this. The end game is worth it, trust me. Get your assignments submitted on time. Please start thinking about your critical thinking and paper, and let me know if you have any questions. I'm here for you. I'll talk to you soon. See ya.